Okay, we're going to go ahead and get started. Welcome, everyone. Welcome to the T1V webinar series. Today's topic is COVID-19 impact on UCC with Dr. David B. Agus and our UCC industry expert panel. I'm Blair Rubio, Director of Marketing at T1V, and I'm going to take you through a quick agenda and our housekeeping items. Mike Feldman, our CEO, is going to introduce our panelists and serve as a moderator throughout the session. We'll then hear from our featured presenter, Dr. Agus, on 3 scenarios he sees unfolding in the post-COVID world. We'll then enter our panelist Q&A, and finally, we'll open it up to a live audience Q&A, and that's where we invite your participation. So in the interest of everyone's time, we try to keep this session to 1 hour. Please send us your questions. You can do this in your Zoom control panel. If we don't get to your question, we'll follow up you after the session. And we'll be recording this webinar, so we'll be sure to share that with you as we close out. So that's it for housekeeping. I'd now like to introduce you to Mike Feldman, CEO and co-founder of T1V. T1V is Mike's second venture, the first being Digital Optics Corporation, a company that Mike co-founded in 1991 while he was a professor of electrical engineering at UNC Charlotte. He has received the Distinguished Young Alumni Award from Duke University's Engineering School, and he is an inventor on more than 80 patents. Mike, it's all yours.
Thanks, Blair, and thanks everybody for being here. Today, we're really excited to talk about COVID-19 and the impact on UCC, that's Unified Collaboration and Communications. I'd like to begin by welcoming our panelists. We have Dana Corey, SVP and GM of Avicor. Hey, Dana. And we also have Geno Zaharie, Director of Alliances and GTM at Logitech.
Thank you.
Welcome, Geno and Dana. And now I'm excited to introduce our featured presenter, Dr. David Agus. Dr. Agus is founder and CEO of the Lawrence Ellison Institute of Transformative Medicine at USC. He's one of the world's leading physicians and a contributor to CBS News. He seems to be the main medical expert now that CBS is using for the COVID-19. And I was lucky enough to meet Dr. Agus about 2 years ago on a video conference right from this building. This is our headquarters in Charlotte, North Carolina. And it was about using our technology for his institute. And a couple days after the conference, Dr. Agus sent me and Adam, our VP of Sales and Marketing, a couple of his books. And I read those books, and he's a cancer specialist, so I thought they were going to be about cancer research, but they really were about just how to live your life healthy and how to deal with various diseases. And they worked out really well. I really liked it. It inspired a lot of conversations between myself and my wife, who's actually is suffering from a long-term chronic disease. So it was really helpful, really interesting. And then after that, we also talked about partnering with Dr. Agus and his institute, and he was very clear. He didn't want it to have a normal customer-vendor relationship. He wanted to have a partnership with us, and I really like working with customers that way, and it's been working out really well so far. So now, while we have all experienced and worked through the stay-at-home orders, the question remains now, what's next for the future of UCC in the workplace and the classroom? And to kick things off, I'd like to ask Dr. Agus to give us his perspective on how the pandemic could play out here over the next 6 to 12 months and its potential impact on workplaces and universities. And as a business leader, I know many of us are interested in modeling our businesses for 3 scenarios, kind of most likely, a better case, and a worst case. And so I'd like to ask Dr. Agus to give us your view in terms of the pandemic, in terms of those 3 scenarios over the next 6 to 12 months. Dr. Agus?
Thank you, Mike. It's been a true privilege to work with T1V. You know, we wanted something at our institute. It's about multidisciplines working together to find new ways to fight disease. And we wanted ways to interact with people all over the globe in a very different way than just straightforward Zoom. Because we're about looking at touching data, images, and orthogonal views of things. And T1V actually enabled a lot more than we thought for us. But getting to the issue at hand, COVID-19. Josh Lederberg, Nobel laureate, one of the greatest thinkers in biology over the last 60 years, said in 1990, the one thing that threatens man and woman's dominance on this earth is the virus. It is our wits, our brains versus their genome, right? This dastardly creature is remarkable in that over 5 million years of evolution, the human genome changed 1%. This virus can change 1% in a day. And so we were obviously, there's been a lot of people talking about pandemics over the years, but very few acting on them. And the world has paid the price for that, as we've seen now. So we're now at various stages in various cities in the country. And so there's no one size fits all for what's happening. But what we do know about this virus, which is pretty amazing, is that it's transmitted almost exclusively through droplets, which means that if you are, whether it be surfaces and others, very little transmission, almost all through droplets and almost all indoors. And so if you wear a mask, you will block the droplet spread, period. And so the role of masks is to prevent you from going to others. So there's an amazing story of a dinner party with 10 people. One person had the virus, asymptomatic. And after 90 minutes at a dinner party, 2 people on either side of him got the virus, but nobody else did. You need close proximity and you need to be able to spread droplets. So as we all go back to work, there are lots of scenarios for companies, but first and foremost is social distancing, shift your workers so they're not all at one time so they can actually enable social distancing when they arrive at work and when they're at work. Wear the mask when you're at work. You have to find a comfortable way to do that because just blocking these droplets will block the spread of it. But there's a lot of hope and optimism happening. And really the bright scenario is that the vaccine, there are 5 vaccine candidates out of the 120 that are mentioned that are really scientifically valid. And the US government is going to support all of them in terms of manufacturing. They just announced a $1.2 billion deal for the Oxford vaccine. It's pretty amazing that the lead candidate for a vaccine came from a university that started in 1064, a university that survived the plague. So the least techie place in the world is what has the most technologically advanced vaccine. I love that part of the story. But we're manufacturing now, we call at-risk manufacturing. So the hope is 2, 3, or more of them work. If they don't work, some of them we've manufactured and we'll throw them away, but the hope is they work. And the pilot data are looking encouraging. So we could have vaccine for first-line workers and for high-risk individuals in September. In addition, there are several drugs in development that look remarkably encouraging. If I have a drug that I know if you start to get symptomatic and I give it to you, I will block you from going to an ICU, my shoulders come down. And I have a very different approach to that virus. And we have a very different approach to how we behave with the virus. And so these are in the works. One is an antibody-based therapy, one is a protease inhibitor, and they look very encouraging. So certainly, I think by mid-summer, we will have some of these being used in patients. We have one validated regimen now, which is remdesivir, a second from Korea that looks very encouraging, and so, which is also available. So there is a lot of hope around the corner for these. But the likely scenario, right, is that we're all starting to go to work with different behavior, and that behavior will last. Whether we have a vaccine or not, there will be changes in behavior. The vaccine will take at least a year to implement broadly across the country. So the behavior changes in year 1 will be different than in year 2 and year 3. After 9/11, all of our behavior changes for long periods of time. So we're going to continue doing what we're all doing now, which is large meetings doing by video. The human brain wasn't wired for Zoom, right? We were wired to look at the cues of each of us as we move in our body language. And it's like that Malcolm Gladwell blink response. When you see somebody, your brain puts a hierarchy to those interactions, and you can't get them from Zoom. So you actually get fatigue from continually searching for them. The power to me of what T1V has done is that the interactions are very different. They're not straightforward Zoom. We're actually getting up, walking around, showing things. It's changed our interactions in a very physical way because we were wired, right? So he or she can make the kill in the wild or collect the berries in the wild and found their way back to the village, survive. So physical activity together with pattern recognition is how our brain works. And the beauty of that physical interaction with a board, and these monitors is you see exactly that. So to me, that's encouraging and exciting. And that's been one of the privileges of working with you guys, Mike, to be able to do this.
That's really neat. Okay, what about and that's great. That was really, really helpful. What about the more conservative or the pessimistic scenario? What would that
So
be?
even in a pessimistic scenario, we will always have virus, right? It's not going to go away, and it hasn't gone away. And so there will always be small upticks around the country. And the hope is we can contain them with testing. Testing right now is predominantly PCR based if you have the virus, but the first antigen test. So a PCR test costs about $75, takes a couple days. It's complex. You need a technician to do it. An antigen test costs $2 or $3. You can do it in several minutes, and anybody can run it. So we're going to get better at testing over the next really month or two. So even in a pessimistic, we'll be able to identify and trace and isolate individuals rather than close down whole aspects of society. But our behavior is going to have to change. It just is going to have to change no matter how you look at it. We are going to have to social distance at work. We're not going to have large get-togethers and meetings. Anything more than where you can fit in a small conference room being social distance will have to be by video or T1V or other interactions. But we will have a vaccine. If it doesn't happen in the fall of this year, it will happen sometime mid next year. The vaccine candidates, all are encouraging. All the talk about, well, you can't make vaccines to coronavirus. They've tried before, and that we can't manufacture them. That's with really prior technology. The current methods, we're going to have one. The worst case scenario is a vaccine will prevent you from getting really sick, but like the flu shot will temper down the virus by 40 or 50%, which will prevent most hospitalizations and ICU visits. And that's good enough to really get back to a more normal way of life.
Okay, what do you think about, say, trade shows, large trade shows? When will they start coming back?
So nothing will happen this calendar year. But certainly if we start to vaccinate the higher risk individuals and we can get that implemented across the country toward the end of first quarter next year, that's potentially possible. I think what we're all shocked at is the productivity we're seeing now by many of these interactions. So, the benefit of trade shows are you can touch and feel a product, and also it's who you meet in the hallways, as we all know. And so the problem with the Zooms is directed to who you want to talk to. You don't have these random meetings that sometimes could be some of the transformative ideas for your company or your business, et cetera. So we're going to have to get back to many of those, but it's not going to happen till, at most end of first quarter next year or potentially later, depending what happens with some of the strategies.
Okay, one more question before we get to the next section. Can you talk about when do you think universities will start having classes on campus?
So there's no answer to that, unfortunately. You have places like Notre Dame that said, hey, we're going to open in August because we really think there's going to be an increased number of cases in December. When flu happens, hospitals are full, there's more nasal and other secretions, more chance for spread. So, and classically, sometimes viruses do go down in the summer, not always with this kind of virus, but they can. So let's take the gut and say we're going to open in August and close before Thanksgiving. You have other universities who are saying, we just don't know. And others are saying, hey, we're not going to risk it. We don't want our children in any risk because we can't house students in dormitories, with just singles. We have to put lots of people in there. And so we're going to close the first semester. And I think we're seeing all of those scenarios. So we don't know the answer. No matter what, there are going to be different interactions at universities come September.
Right. That was fantastic. That was amazing insight and giving us quite a bit of clarity, I think, on some of the details around coronavirus. We're now going to switch gears and shift to our panel session. I'm going to ask a question in the group, and each panelist will get 2 minutes to answer. Okay, we're going to go in alphabetical order. So we'll hear from Dr. Agus first, then Dana Corey, then Geno. Then I'll close with my own thoughts. So first, how do you see classrooms adopting post-COVID-19? Dr. Agus?
So you're going to see a couple things. One is we know 94% of the hospitalizations in New York City were people who were obese, diabetes, and blood pressure issues, or elderly. So if you're a professor, students obviously don't fit in most of those. But if you're high risk as a student because you have other disorders going on, or as a professor, then you may be doing distance learning for your class, no matter where you are, right? If you've got diabetes and you're a 30-year-old professor, you're not going to take the risk of being in a classroom. You're going to see the very large entry classrooms, being done by other methodologies. And we need to have, our next generation taught. We need creative learning. it's amazing. You know, I don't know if you guys have ever seen Khan Academy. So Sal Khan, out-of-work engineer, created these remarkable, 5 to 6 minute videos for kids where he explains one aspect of whether physics, biology, math, etc. But it's organic. He draws and he does stuff. He makes mistakes and kids trust it. Fancy graphics, people are moving away from because this next generation doesn't trust them. They think you're selling something. So I think you're going to see much more organic interactions when we do these remote learning, which are going to happen within classrooms. I think we need to reinvent classrooms. And it's not just going to be the fancy PowerPoints. It's going to be this organic. I draw and I show how the virus can get into a cell and what it does in the cell. People trust that. It's me talking. It's like the old blackboards with those chalk. You trust what a teacher drew and you wrote down those notes. But when you see this fancy graphic, you think you're trying to sell a viewpoint. And that's where the world has moved now. The fancier it is, the less people respond. It's kind of counterintuitive in many respects.
Okay, good. Data, do you want to comment?
Yeah, thanks, Mike. I think, definitely Dr. Agus's words are definitely resonating for sure. And it creates cause and opportunity at the same time. I think when I look at, in the particular, the return to offices, the first and foremost is cleaning. The regimen of cleaning for offices that should include and does include, desk chairs and displays as well. So while being an interactive panel, you might ask a few questions around that, but I think the fact is with proper cleaning the office, we're going to get through a lot of this anyways, right? Much like we're seeing at restaurants now as they open and so forth like that. The next part is obviously engagement. Dr. Agus talked about that. I mean, the fact that for the last 30 or more years, especially in collaboration, has been around productivity and engagement, working together in a face-to-face environment. My position there is if you're going to meet, and we will meet, make it the most productive as possible then. Stop settling on the in-between technology or solutions that don't get you there, right? So therefore, if we're going to pull people together into a room or on the call or where we are, make it the most highest outcome as possible. So I think basically the cleaning, and then, of course, the last thing is allowing for the work from anywhere idea. Productivity should not be diminished, whether I'm in an office or in a Starbucks to the building or in the meeting room. I should be able to take that and have that same experience and productivity elsewhere.
Okay, Dana, yeah, that's great. That's really good. Yeah, keeping things clean, bringing people back. Geno, how do you see classrooms adapting post-COVID-19?
Well, from the lens of like Logitech, at least the video collaboration team, we make cameras, we make microphones and speaker technology, right, to work with these wonderful platforms to deliver an immersive experience, right, a very engaging experience. And what Dr. Agus was talking about, how we need to, as educators, possibly create more of a rich environment for those eyeballs that are watching or contributing on their far end, is extremely important. It's not very difficult to put microphone technology in the right place to capture the voice of a spoken word, or have multiple cameras, right, that give the viewer a different viewpoint of that physical space. So as the classrooms start to be reinvented in a sense, with maybe students that are, half of them are at home, half of them are coming because of the spatial requirements that the schools might impose, you need to think about how that technology is going to be sent to those that are on video, right? For those that are on this 2D environment that we're kind of doing right now. So, like the whole issues back in the day where how do I mic up an entire classroom so everyone can speak, right, to somebody who might be on the far end? And now it's kind of a reverse. How do we take, the environment that has been there and really create a production out of our lesson plans, right? How do we actually engage and bring all those right physical objects or people in the room to the far ends? And that's kind of that middle zone, right, as the classrooms kind of evolve and more people will come back. But yeah, it's a matter of, capturing everything possible and sending it to those on the other end using lenses and microphones and speakers. And it's not too hard to do. It's just a matter of putting a plan together.
Yeah, I think all that's possible, and I do think you need the lenses and the cameras, and you need the touch screens, you need the software, and I do think what all three of you guys said is correct. And really, this was something that was happening even before COVID-19, right? We call it active learning, right? Where the whole thing about where students would come into a classroom and a professor would just lecture to this giant lecture hall. I mean, that's not much. You could do that online, right? Really, that's not the most productive way to teach. It's not the best way for students to learn. And so this whole active learning has come about, which is right along what you guys were all saying, that the teacher says something, and then right afterwards, the students, they work on it, they do it, and they get that memory that Dr. Agus, you were referring to. And I think that's going to continue. That's going to need to continue in the classroom. I would think that you'll have some students that are at home. The professor might not actually be there and be able to teach remotely. You might have fewer students in each room, and maybe a teacher is teaching multiple rooms, and somehow they, with students spread out more, and all that needs to get linked together. And I do think that you will have students in the classroom, because I think that the face-to-face is very important. So that will come back. And when people are remote, you're not going to get quite as good experience as you're there face-to-face. But I do think you can do a lot better than just a Zoom call. And I think that's what our goal is to make it as close as we can to actually being there. Let me go to the next question. How will travel restrictions impact the way global teams connect and collaborate? Dr. Agus, you want to start?
It's an interesting question. So there's, over the next year, there's going to be limited travel for two main reasons. One is certain countries are going to say, hey, listen, I don't want anybody from abroad. We have our own policies. We're keeping the virus under control. Why would we risk somebody from another country coming in? And what you're going to start to see is the equivalent of a digital ID for immunity status. And that will happen globally, and it's being worked on now. So that will overcome that. Secondarily, you have a fear of getting on planes. Planes are obviously have remarkable filtration systems. Every 4 minutes, the air goes through a HEPA filter. So they are filtered for virus, but you're only as good as the person that's around the corner from you on the plane or across the road from you on the plane. And so there's a trepidation, and sometimes rightfully so, sometimes not, for getting on those planes. And I think we're all questioning through this is what travel is actually necessary. I'm shocked by some of the productivity I get on things. And certain areas I'm actually doing much better. I probably didn't need to travel. I'm doing all my TV from my home. I don't have to go to New York or go to a studio. I'm doing it from home. And I mean, there is something, for it. There's something powerful to that. At the same time, we all have to do some travel, and it's going to happen. So it's going to be a hybrid of them. But I do think airlines, I've talked to a bunch of airline CEOs in the last 2 weeks. I mean, they're changing what they're doing dramatically so. And we're going to have a different experience. Just like we did after 9/11 with security, we're going to have that on travel now with regard to health, a new focus.
Yeah, great. I mean, it is going to be a different world. I agree with that. Dana, do you want to comment on travel restrictions and the impact on how global teams can connect and collaborate?
Yeah, kind of going back to my first point there about if we're going to meet, make it the most productive. I mean, if we can't meet, we have to find new ways to be more productive. And so I think one of them right now is we're all faced with a little bit of video fatigue. So one of the things I think that's coming our way is a race towards better productivity through solutions like T1V, where I'm engaging, working from anywhere, first of all. Second, when I'm in a space, I'm making the most out of that. I'm going beyond just seeing video, because now we've seen this massive transformation of people being on video now. So now the next question is what's next, right? And more importantly, especially in business and universities, generating outcomes and engagement. In business, it's about business outcomes. How do departments that are filled with financial people to operations to marketing and others have better outcomes in these tools as they are now working from anywhere or otherwhere, right? So to me, it's a big change. Just again, bringing those tools to the right place, the right time, but making them engaging. And then the other final one there is, and you guys do this very well, persistence of data, right? Continuous evolution of data and sharing requires things like the cloud and things like where we can take our work anywhere and engage and roll continuously in a productive way, not being a one-time meet and then that's it. We forget about it, all that stuff. We have to have persistence. So that's some of the thoughts I have.
Yeah, no, I think that's good. And that's a big weakness of just a Zoom call. You have your meeting and then you're done. You really want to take notes, have that outcome, and then save it and be able to refer to it later. Yes. Geno, do you want to comment on this?
Sure. Yeah, to kind of Dana's point, there's this meeting fatigue thing happening. I think we're doing it. I mean, I've personally had just endless video meetings, which is great, right? But I think as global teams start to realize, we need to put a little bit more structure around our meetings. An agenda is always a good thought, right? It's similar to a lesson plan that might be taught by an instructor, right? By a professor, right? Here's what we're going to review. Here's what we're going to go over. So everyone kind of knows what that agenda is, because there's this kind of this fun aspect of we're connecting on video. And now I think this is the way it is. So let's come up with a plan, right? And possibly reduce the amount of those ad hoc kind of meetings, get back to the chats and try to get those things in, kind of streamlined. So it's really streamlining your productivity. For teams that haven't used technology in their ways, it's fast forwarding their use of it, right? So maximize the platform that you're leveraging. There's a lot of great tools. I mean, T1V offers so many different ways to engage, and I think you're going to see an acceleration of those tool sets, and as it becomes kind of the norm, right, of how I need to survive in this new kind of global environment of us not always being together, at least short term. So it's really more about global teams who maybe haven't used technology before really starting to leverage it because that's the way it is. And then we'll see kind of a quicker adoption of productivity, I feel. So for sure.
Yeah, I think I agree with that, Geno, and I think of that. One of the first cases here in North Carolina, or the outbreaks in North Carolina, came from this, I think it was called Biogen conference or BioSite, and it was a conference in Boston. Biogen, yeah, and they brought people thanks, Dr. Agus, all over the world to come and meet there. And I mean, I was thinking, they really didn't need to do that with some of the technologies that are out there. You can actually have things set up where you can actually take notes and work on things, move things around, just like Dr. Agus was talking about, and have it actually occur at all the different sites simultaneously. So I think you could put together a really powerful multi-site conference that could be really engaging and interactive. So, okay, the one more question, and then we'll take questions from the audience. Dr. Agus, how do you see the workplace adapting a year from now?
I think one of the positives, if you could call it positive, from this pandemic and our behavior change is that we're going to start to measuring productivity. I think we're seeing it now that, it used to be kind of down, we really can't measure it. It's kind of gray. But now that people are working from home, companies are obliged to measure productivity. And we're going to start to see, real metrics around ways of interacting. And so it'll be data driven. Right now, it's all just empiric. Let's all get together for a meeting. But there's going to be feedback loops where we can actually get data back. Is when we do the meeting this way, how productive was it? When we did it this way, how productive was it? And so that feedback loop, I think, is going to be very powerful. And productivity, is in two ways: how much got done, and also, the mental and the physical state of the employee. If you keep driving your employees and they get this fatigue, you're not going to get creativity and long-term productivity. So you need to engage the two together. But I think it's going to be the collection of data with feedback loop that is really going to be paramount over the next year, and it's going to be a new way of doing business.
It's interesting. Yeah, I never heard that before. That's good. Data, how do you see the workplace adapting a year from now?
Well, I mean, Dr. Agus, he covered a lot of that, obviously, at the beginning of the situation. Boy, if I knew this one downright, I'd be planning it right now, I could say.
Yeah.
But what I'm seeing, at least, and hearing from clients, and of course, it depends on state and country at the time. But we're hearing a lot about smaller spaces. He alluded to that earlier. Rooms adapting and changing from large spaces to smaller meetup areas, if you will, in the office. Of course, we talked about the migration to work from anywhere as another part of that. What does that mean in office versus out of the office? And I think the big thing that companies, in particular, maybe in universities a little bit, is we pride ourselves in our companies around our culture and developing culture from the inside out, if you will. And I wonder, the biggest thing I think about it when it comes to employer office in the future is generating culture when so much of your force is not in the building. And then developing that camaraderie and that partnership that's necessary to collaborate, and to never get to see those cues that person wasn't happy until it was too late when they left, or they dropped the class, or whatever it is, So the struggle would be to really find ways to engage and to create that culture. And I think interactivity and what we do, we generate part of that opportunity, but clearly not all of it. So back to the fact that I wish I had that crystal ball right now, but no matter what, we'll adapt.
All right, good. Geno?
Yeah. There's this immediate step of making employees, students or employees feeling secure and safe when they have the opportunity to go back to their workplace. And we've heard of concepts of, the open, you walk in, you check in with the receptionist, that being kind of more like a mud room, right? Being able to prep yourself to go into the facility, which then needs to be this wonderful environment, right? Back to Dana's point about culture. The culture is meant, within teams, there's culture, right? Within your small work group that you might be working on a project team or a department, but then there's the company culture in general. And usually that's encapsulated by a facility or a physical building. So I kind of go back to the idea that when I get to go to the office or I'm going to use those environments and I'm looking at the meeting spaces in which, Mike, I want to sit with you and actually communicate with you, not just call the people we need to call over video or do something away from each other, but we're in the same space, right? How do we, again, put the right technology in the room so that we can have this great experience that's actually desirable, right, to go back and leverage. So I think it's more about, the near-term steps, right, the near-term things that our employers can do to make ourselves feel very secure to go back, and that will slowly fade away. But to Dana's point about these room spaces that are now being divided to maintain that distancing that people will be following, but it's also making sure that the technology in those rooms are there for me to use it, and I'm going in there for a purpose, not just to sit in a room and actually have a conversation with Dana while we call someone because it's convenient, right? There's a draw in there, and tools that I can leverage in those spaces. So.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. I guess when I think about it, a lot fewer people coming to work, clearly, a lot more people working from home. We've all seen it. People say, oh, they're more productive from home. Hey, people really need to come in? So, maybe you think, somewhere, over time, a year from now, maybe 50% or, 60, 70% of the workforce will be working from home, something like that. But then in the office, then you think about, okay, well, you're going to have these rooms and people need to be spread out more. So you're going to need, you might not save that much on office space. Maybe you could save a little bit on office space, but you're going to need more space because people are going to be spread out more. And then you need to think about, okay, now all these different companies that are out there that are set up, and now all of a sudden over the next year, as people come back, there's going to be, I think, a tremendous demand for getting things set up so that everybody from home can come in and remote, and you can have all these collaborative meetings. And maybe you could connect different rooms and different sites.
Yeah, Mike, can I add one thing real quick too?
Go ahead.
I think as Dr. Agus probably, I felt like I gave a little bit of confidence around maybe a potential path towards reducing a lot of what we're hearing and seeing a future for us that doesn't involve such dramatic, that we don't shift our entire business to this concept that it'll be in that such a dramatic fashion. I mean, we as people, as you said earlier, we need to return to a norm that has been human history, of engagement for forever. And so while I totally embrace the new norm, I only kind of caution too that if we solve some of these things that were not a problem even 3-4 months ago, and we can get through this because I know our doctors will get us there and the industry will get us there, that we don't shift everything and forget everything we learned at the same time. Great, we come back out of this thing with 20% work from home, that's awesome. 60%, 40%, oh, that scares me like crazy. Because it means we didn't conquer as much as I thought we would. But in any case, just one guy's opinion.
Yeah. What do you think about that, Dr. Agus?
It's going to depend on, what your business is, I think. I mean, there's no question we need to learn lessons here. We need to change. This is a wake-up call that, 31% of the U.S. economy is food and health. And there's almost no discourse and thinking on it. The political cycles are 4 years. So why would a politician spend money for something that they're not sure is going to happen? What we learned is that being prepared matters. And we forgot that. And so there's going to be a new urgency on those respects. But certain businesses require people to be there physically. And as you said, we'll probably take more space because they're going to social distance and have conference rooms interacting with each other rather than being in one. Others can work from home with very little decrement to productivity. And it's going to be varied. And I think, Andy Grove, the CEO of Intel, used to call it an inflection point. When the curve of progress versus time changes, you can adapt and succeed wildly or not adapt and fail. And we're not at an inflection point. And so the great companies are going to adapt to what's right for their vertical, and the others won't. And there's going to be problems there.
Yeah, I agree. I do think, I do agree with what you're saying, Dana, and what you said, Dr. Agus. I do agree that the in-person meetings are important and culture is really important. And how do you get that? But I think we need to work on ways, even when you have, if there are going to be a large percentage working from home, sometimes they're going to come in. You know, maybe you have some people who are working from home 2 days a week. You know, maybe some people are working from home. You know, some percentage of them are working, just coming in the office once a month. You know, but you have to have time, I think, for people to get together and meet, and we have to get over the fear. But I think we will.
What do you mean you're agreeing? Shouldn't you disagree? It's more fun if we argue and get in fights. And come on.
All right, I'll try to find something to disagree with one of you guys on.
Good.
Okay, so let's go to the next section. I think the next section was going to be opening up for questions. Blair, do you have any questions from the audience?
We have a ton of questions, so
Right.
brace yourselves, everyone. Lots of great kind of input coming in. So one question, well, we have some themes developing. So one of the themes, the questions is around, you know, if Dr. Agus, you made the point that it's the droplets that are circulating the virus. So if that's the case, you know, why is it still critical to wash our hands and to clean objects in office spaces? And can you speak to that topic for us a little bit?
So it takes, believe it or not, this virus is difficult to transmit, which I know sounds kind of crazy, but it takes about 1,000 particles to transmit. Every time I breathe or talk, I emit about 40 to 50 particles. Majority fall to the ground through gravity. So it takes a prolonged interaction with someone at a rather close distance to transmit the virus. That's why almost all the cases are family transmission at home, at events like dinners and lunches where you're together for a long time, working next to each other, in a meat packing factory, in a nursing home where you're all crammed together, and long interactions rather than just walking by on the street. The CDC announced today is that there's very little transmission, if at all, by surfaces. So, certainly washing the hands works. We know with common colds and other things that it is a means of transmission. It's not the dominant one, but it's a very easy thing that we can all do to stop transmission. So washing hands and surfaces, you don't have to be maniacal about it. But I do think it's very important. And so by saying it's not the most dominant way, doesn't mean that there's no transmission there. But I think that we really have to focus on the airborne more than anything, but still washing hands is critical.
So what do you think about would you say it's safe to use touchscreens?
Yeah, I mean, listen, I think touchscreens are fine in the scheme of things. You certainly want to, watch them in between use if you can. And you want to potentially find ways to do it so it's not going to be an issue, whether we have pointers and others. I mean, there's still that fear in our head, right? And while we say for dominant means, listen, if you've got gunk coming out your nose and you touch yourself and then touch a touchscreen, there's going to be a lot of virus there. Don't get me wrong. The hope is that people, when they are sick or symptomatic or have excretions, don't come to work. But we can't always rely on that in today's world, unfortunately.
Dana, you want to comment on that at all?
Well, I'm just so glad he said he's not afraid of touchscreens to start off with. Yeah, I think it goes back to the principle that we're hearing all over, as he mentioned before, it's cleaning and cleanliness and being respectful to how we feel and where we take ourselves when we don't feel well. I mean, and I think in our industry, we're starting to see a lot more of it is addressing the need or how to clean technology. But we also have to recognize, and I said this early on, whether I'm touching the door handle, the desk, the chair, the touchscreen display, the touchscreen on the table, it all needs to be clean to whatever regimen that the industry is telling us to do it to. Luckily for us, as a technology, as a category, we've protected ourselves in a way that allows us to be clean. And I think one benefit we have over, say, other types of displays, especially things like ATMs and at the shopping stores, is that we're not tactile in the sense that we don't have crevices and stuff. We are a flat screen. And so that gives us an advantage of cleanliness and not being able to hold things in certain special spots that maybe can't be cleaned as easily. So, our position is provide the tools, be part of the program, and be respectful and who we are as people, and make sure we don't carry it around to share it with others. And And you do
Yeah,
that.
And remember,
we're good.
we keep saying clean your screen. I mean, the other option is clean your hands before you use the touchscreen, by the way,
Yeah.
which is also remarkably effective.
Yeah.
Hey, can I jump in on this, Mike? I have something to.
Yeah, go ahead, Geno.
Yeah. I just wanted to say, using these screens and it's not just a single person activity, right? We're going up to these screens and we're doing things as a group. The camera manufacturers, such as Logitech and others, we have ways to auto frame people to give those on the other end, right? If it's a video solution or a video transmission, to not have to use remote controls, right? Not having to use maybe the remote with the camera. Let some of the AI and some of this technology kind of help with that group framing, if you will, so that everyone is caught that's in the act of teaching collaboratively to others on the other end. So it's all there. It's just a matter of us just enabling the feature sets. So.
Yeah, that's good. Go ahead, Dan.
Sorry about that. If I can, real quick, two things to add. I just forgot. One, our displays and a lot of great displays all offer the ability to use gloves. So in an environment where gloves are required, like level 5 clean labs and so forth, gloves are always an option and they react the same way. Second is the idea of a stylus, right? Styluses are also a means to keep a personal device that we carry around that we then interact with as well. So should it be an environment, there's lots of ways to handle it. I like just clean your hands, clean the surface, but if you have other requirements, either because of the industry or where you are, or the use of a stylus, those are other options too.
Yeah, I really like the stylus. I have a background as a professor, and as a professor, everybody has different styles. But I like to get up and draw and to write on something. And I just can't picture a classroom where you're not doing that. So you either have a whiteboard and you have dry erase mark. Then if you have those, you need to clean those. Well, what about if everybody had their own personal stylus? We can do that, and you can use that with our technology, with your screens, and you can change the color right on the board.
Yeah. And they're use passive ones that we have to spend $100 to buy them, spend
That's
$3
right.
to buy a stylus. So if you lose it, it's not the end of the world.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. All right, Blair, next question.
Next question. So this is really for Dr. Agus, do you think that COVID will be like the flu? So in other words, some people will get the shot and then they still might contract the virus.
Yeah. So this shot will be shots probably that it will require, at least 2 shots for immunity in many people. Remember, elderly, young people don't make great immune responses. So you may have 2 shots for the first vaccine, and you may require yearly shots afterwards to boost immunity, because classically immunity to things like coronavirus are not long-lived or that long-lived. But what we'll see is that many people will temper it down dramatically. So they're remember, 80% are asymptomatic with this. But you still could get sick and just not as sick. And so I think in the big scheme of things, that's fine. I mean, what we worry about are people dying. What we worry about is people going on ventilators. We're not going to be able to prevent all sickness, but if we can temper down the dying, we're going to behave a lot differently and be less afraid of it. What we're afraid of is that, 2 or 3% that end up being hospitalized, and we can't identify who they are in advance. I can't say, Mike, we got to just keep you indoors because you will be hospitalized. And Dana, you can go out. And so because of that, all of us have that fear that we will be one of them, or our grandmother will, or our next door neighbor will. And so if we can temper that down with a vaccine, which I think will happen, and the problem with this vaccine, this is where people are going to get pissed off, is that we need to get 90% herd immunity, because elderly and babies and young people aren't going to respond, initially. And so in order to do that, we have to vaccinate enough people. And so it may not be optional, these vaccines, and that's going to create a big uproar in how we do this. We may say, hey, listen, it's not going to be mandatory, but you can't get on an airplane or travel unless you have a vaccine.
Interesting. Yeah.
They're speaking on kind of mandating things around the coronavirus. There was a question that came in on whether you feel that employers should require employees to wear masks when they come to the office.
Why not? I mean, if we could stop the spread of this virus, decrease absenteeism and sickness, and potentially prevent death with a mask, which is not that intrusive, by all means, I think they should. Listen, if you have your own office, you don't have to wear one. If you're, 10, 15 feet away from anybody, you're probably okay. But if you're near other people or any interaction or walking in a hallway, you should. I see patients 2 days a week in my clinic. I wear a mask. Every patient we make wear a mask, and we can have interactions without worrying about spreading the virus. I can't see why not. to get normative behavior change, you need leadership. And right now, our country's leadership is not showing that normalizing the behavior of wearing a mask. I think they should. And I think CEOs of companies need to stand up and wear masks and show their employees this is normalized behavior.
Dr. Agus, I just wanted to ask you about the vaccine that you just mentioned. I was just thinking about that. What if you've recovered or you get an antibody test? I mean, would you then not need the vaccine?
So we don't yet have a test for immunity. Right now, an antibody just test says prior exposure. It doesn't say whether you have immunity. Not all antibodies are protective. And so we're waiting for that test. About half of immunity is T cell, which isn't even measured in an antibody test. So I thought you just fell to the floor there. Well, that's good. You're wearing a mask. I like it. So we're not going to have such a test. So we will give immunity certificates, but it's going to be with a vaccine, even if you've priorly been exposed, because what we think is there will be probably several months protection, but not much longer than that. But again, that's hypothesis. We don't yet have the assays to know.
Okay. Yeah.
Good. I like your mask.
Next question. Thanks.
A little tougher.
Well, okay.
There's a question around just like a global outlook. So, we spoke about where we are, the United States. Are there certain regions that you feel are more susceptible or vulnerable looking, ahead to the next 6 to 12 months for coronavirus?
I think it's certain industries, right? I mean, obviously meat packing, nursing homes, where you have a lot of people together in a space. And there's almost forced interactions, those are much higher risk. Cities with higher density populations are at much higher risk. I mean, New York City, they've got these things called subway cars where they jam people in for significant periods of time where you have interactions and you can't help breathing in particles. And so those are always going to be our higher risk areas. In parts of the country or in industries where there is natural separation, there's going to be a lot less spread, that's clear. There are certain industries where the average age of the employee is 20 or 30. There's a lot less risk there for symptomatic individuals and really being devastating. Other companies have a very much elderly workforce, a different kind of workforce, and it's going to be very different there. So there's not a general answer. It really is knowing your own workforce and developing your own plan for your company, your location at that moment in time.
What about the ones that have already had the outbreak and have come down, or the ones that haven't had it yet? Is it like more likely to, like in China and Korea, because they actually were able to suppress it, or to come back again in Spain or Italy or Sweden?
China and South Korea and Israel are amazing places because they say, listen, we will get away with some privacy issues. So you'll give up some privacy in return. As soon as you're positive, we contact trace everyone that was available to you. All your neighbors get a text, hey, David in apartment 3B has corona, watch out for him. And then as soon as I'm clear, they say, hey, David's okay, you can now interact with them. So they give up that privacy for the greater community. We won't do that in our country. And I think we're going to face issues there going forward. But still, in the most affected neighborhoods of New York City, only 20% of the people, it's estimated now, have been exposed to the virus. In Los Angeles now, we only estimate that it's about 4.5%. So we're still missing 95% of people. So there is significant room for other waves of infection unless we start to, practice these things like wearing a mask and social distancing. They are low tech. We've been doing it for over 100 years for viruses, but they work.
Okay.
There's a question. Yep. So kind of switching gears a little bit. There's a question from Michael here. How do we support teachers in K through 12 who may have a partial or fully remote classroom? What are the scenarios of teachers in building teaching practices for remote students in the K through 12 space?
Can I say something real quick? So we've noticed when it comes to all these businesses trying to remote with either dance classes, instructing, keeping the business alive while people are remote. And it seemed like what we've been seeing a lot of is there's the video side of it. So as a teacher, you're receiving all the students, you're seeing them all on screen right there. So the larger the screen, the more I can see them, the more the students, I can see their interactions. But also taking advantage of that interactivity to have them engaged and participate. Right? We know with video fatigue, if I just sit there as a student, I believe on my side, I'm just watching, especially as a younger person, you're going to lose me pretty fast, right? So finding ways to get them engaged and using those tools that are there might be viable ways that will be more important than ever. We've just seen it because businesses have struggled to stay alive with their clients, and they've used the technology to engage them, to keep their classes going, and maybe it's a precursor to something else.
Yeah, maybe I can jump in on this too. We've seen a lot of, the camera that I'm using for this webinar, right? It's the fixed camera in front of my desktop, but folks that are kind of repurposing those, right? And to Dana's point, to extend my business or keep it alive while I'm, in hibernation for a bit. When I want to talk, I usually talk with my hands a lot, and I know a lot of professors that are instructing. It's a different experience for them now. They're driving a lesson plan through a PowerPoint or something, right? And I want to be able to be me again, and I want to be able to stand back from the technology a bit. So again, it might require an upgrade or a slight upgrade into cameras that can see more of that physical space that you're in, so I can get back to actually being me. And that's something that we're seeing in all these different side businesses that are happening, right? And where people want to go back to the way they were, but you can emulate that in a sense to increase that engagement. And that engagement's what's going to get us back to normal, no matter if it stays in that shape, right? But it needs to be more than just a talking head with maybe some data. And it feeds right into how T1V kind of solves for that, right? For both in person or, of course, in a distance environment too. So big believer in that.
Yeah, and we've seen people using our technology at universities that are doing that are all remote or that are partially remote and have either and partially in the room and spread out more, and they're getting that engagement, that feedback, and that active learning. But we haven't seen much through K through 12, but I wonder if it would work there as well.
Yeah, I think it will. I mean, especially if the classroom is the destination for the teacher, right? And the students and the kids are still at home. There are ways for them to kind of up their game a bit. And you'll see that happen from just very, proactive or, creative teachers, right? And those are the ones that usually start to bubble up because they want to harness the technology a bit more.
So would you guys ever put, in Logitech equipment, some sort of feedback loop? You can measure my attention by just looking at my eye tracking and knowing what I'm doing. So to know when I show the picture in harsh colors or this colors is more attraction, do you ever generate that kind of data internally?
Well, we have the sensor technology to do all of that, right? This comes down to the privacy. Is what is it doing? Is it looking at me as a person, or is it looking at me as a statistic, a stat of some sort, right? That then again, to your point, I can measure engagement or start to measure productivity as everyone is kind of uniform. So yes, there's plenty of AI tools out there that will measure engagement, eye gaze, right? Attention, if I'm looking in one direction, it knows if I'm not looking at the camera, right? So yeah, or not looking at the screen. So those technologies are there. It's a matter of how these platforms, right, can support those. And then of course our comfort as individuals, is it capturing me as a person, or is it just a statistic for the decision makers, right? So that's kind of the fine line of that.
I would think the further challenge in K through 12 is that, in colleges, most students want to be there, right? Where in case of K through 12, not everybody wants to be there and wants to be participating. So yeah, it'd be interesting to see how that engagement happens.
Yeah.
All right, Blair, do we have time for one more question? Okay, let's do one more.
Yeah, let's do one more question. So there have been a lot of questions around the vaccine. There's several right in front of me right now that are asking, how will I know if I'm developed immunity to the virus after I've gotten a vaccine?
That's a great question. And with all of the vaccine, they are building in assays or tests to look for immunity and to study how long it lasts in each population. Because there's going to be no one size fits all for babies, for toddlers, for teenagers, for 40-year-olds, for 80-year-olds. It's going to be a different answer. And that's being built down. And that's some of the levels of complexity that are happening. And that's why we're going to have, some sort of cloud-based database to actually not track like where you're going, but track how many you need and make sure you have the right to give you that immunity. So that's all being developed now. And literally half the calls I'm in during the day are these global calls addressing these issues. What's exciting is that scientists across the globe have banded together and worked together for this issue like I've never seen before. We're working with, science ministers literally in countries, half of which I've never heard of, who are stepping up in ways that are really tremendous, and scientists across the globe really working as one in collaboration. The same thing with pharmaceutical companies working together with scientists. It's all pre-competitive now, which I love it. And hopefully that will yield benefit to all of us in the short run, because we need it.
Okay, yeah, that was great. That was a great question to end on. That was a great answer. Sorry I wasn't able to be more combative during this meeting, Dr. Agus, but if we just want to wrap up now, if everybody could just take maybe 1 minute.
Well, I can. Are you going to get a haircut soon, or is this going to be the going on as during the pandemic?
I'm working on it. If you can help me get the barbershops open in North Carolina, I'd appreciate it.
Got it.
Why don't we go around 1 minute for everybody to just wrap up your thoughts. Geno, why don't we start with you?
Yeah, no, I just want to thank everyone for attending. And thank you for hosting. And I think overall, use the tools that you have right at your desktop and start to think about different ways to use them creatively, and look for ways to kind of enhance your experience, right, while you're presenting yourself to your teams. And the next meeting you do, maybe put a little structure behind it, because you know that everyone else is probably doing the same thing, so that you have productive outcomes. But thank you. This has been wonderful.
Okay. Dana, do you want to say anything to wrap up?
Yeah, definitely. And also back what Geno says around, thanks for letting us participate in this. Obviously, our partnership, Dr. Agus, great insight. Wish I could spend many hours with you actually talking about this more. I'm sure lots of people do. I think the takeaway that now, kind of putting on our technology hat here for a second, is what this combination of technology offers. What will put us in a better position is, since we don't know the future, use platforms like technology that adapt and are agnostic across those evolution, right? So what are the new norms? So T1V's ability to adapt into a work from anywhere, right? Avocor and Logitech's ability to have solutions that are amenable to any kind of platform. Those are things that give us freedom as we go down this path of uncertainty. UCC was already, full of uncertainty and lots of opinions. Now there's even more. So the suggestion here, the takeaway I try to give off, is that pick things that are agnostic, pick things that are amenable to the changes, and maybe we'll be protected.
Okay, great. Dr. Agus?
Dana, I agree totally with what you said. The reason we started working with T1V, as you alluded to, Mike, early on, was, we wanted a partner, because I don't know how to do real interactions well. And to me, it's critical that I get different disciplines. And I'm not going to fly somebody in from Kyoto, where the world stem cell expert is, on a daily basis. I need to interact with him regularly in a much different way than just a video call. So we wanted to work with you guys to figure out the new model, because it's a new world. And, we have to figure out how to better use these platforms and technologies we have. Whether, cameras that eventually will be three-dimensional, whether, touch displays that will have haptic feedback in others, whether, you guys, being able to draw in real time and edit things. It's going to be a new world, and I'm excited to see where it goes, but I love working with partners that are willing to adapt and don't get afraid by it. And maybe we'll someday get a haircut.
Thanks, Dr. Agus. And it's been great working with you and Dana and Geno and all you guys. And I mean, what we're doing with Dr. Agus at USC, I mean, one of the things he mentioned to me that just was huge for me is that our technology, and I mean, all three of our companies together, is really helping the cancer research community. And that's fantastic to be part of that. So,
by the way, anybody that wants to come by and see T1V in action at our institute in LA is welcome to. It is the coolest new building with, literally T1V interacting throughout the whole thing. So anytime you want to come by, just send Mike a text and he can arrange it to visit.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Dr. Agus. Yeah. So that brings us to the end of our session. Thank you, Dr. Agus of the Institute of Transformative Medicine of USC, Dana Corey from Avocor, and Geno Zaharie from Logitech for being here. And thank you so much again for joining us. And we hope you can join us at one of our future webinars. Please visit t1v.com/webinars to check out some of our upcoming sessions. Have a wonderful rest of your day.